Are you a brand new podcaster, hoping to share what you're passionate about to whoever's willing to listen, but you aren't sure where to start? Navigating the logistics of your podcast can be confusing, from tracking growth to getting your podcast on the biggest platforms like Apple and Spotify. That's why I use Captivate. Captivate is a podcast publishing site that's user-friendly and offers everything you need to fulfill your podcast's full potential. They'll help you publish your podcast to all of the most popular platforms, as well as help you track your growth through daily, weekly, 28, and 90-day download numbers, as well as the averages, so you can see where your podcast might be flourishing or floundering. What's more, they'll help you with promotion and advertising. They offer free courses on how to start and run the perfect podcast, and they even throw in a free website with your subscription, completely customizable to fit your podcast's personality. You can sign up now starting at $19 a month, and you'll even get a free 7-day trial so you can decide whether or not it's right for you. Sign up today at thezoologist.net/captivate, and what's more, you'll be supporting my show. Captivate truly is a podcaster's best friend. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Zoologist Podcast. I'm your host, Jake, and today, as always, we'll be learning a little bit more about the coolest, the weirdest, and the wildest that the animal kingdom has to offer. Now, let's get ready to get wild. Today's episode is all about one of the strangest creatures walking our planet today, none other than the duck-billed platypus. These animals look like an odd mix of several different species. Besides their bill, they also have the tail of a beaver, the webbed feet of an otter, and the torso of a mole. As weird as they look, however, this animal gets even stranger the more you learn about it. Today we'll be talking about everything that makes the platypus so unusual. We'll also be exploring where they came from and how humanity has historically reacted to these iconic freaks of nature. Let's dive in. Hello, and thank you all so much for hopping onto today's episode of the Zoologist Podcast. I hope you all had a great start to the month of May. I realized a little bit too late I missed an opportunity. I should have done a Star Wars-themed episode in honor of May the 4th. I don't know, maybe next year. At some point, though, I do want to do an episode about some of the animals or creatures that are featured in the Star Wars universe. I feel like that would be super interesting. I talk about their backstory, what we know about them, how George Lucas and some of those other directors came up with them. Send me an email. Let me know if that's something you want to listen to. If it's a popular enough idea, maybe I'll release it sometime before next May 4th. Also, as always, if you are a brand new listener, first of all, welcome. Second of all, once this episode is finished, do make sure to check out some of our older episodes as well. We release new ones every Tuesday, so also make sure to subscribe or follow us on your favorite streaming platform so that you're getting notified every time a new episode drops. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, so you can go ahead and follow us on social media if you'd like to stay in the loop. Anyway, on to today's topic. We haven't talked enough about Australian animals on this show, at least in my opinion. We had the one episode about emus, but Australia is full of really, really fascinating creatures, and so I want to begin remedying that today by talking about one of the world's strangest creatures, and one of Australia's many national icons. Just based on first impressions alone, the platypus is probably going to be one of the weirdest animals that you've ever seen. Even if your only impression of the platypus comes from having binged Phineas and Ferb at some point in your life, you'll know that these animals, they have a very distinct look to them. They have their duck-like bill, their webbed feet, their beaver tail, their furry torso. As strange as they look, however, what's really bizarre about these animals is that they continue to get weirder the more that you learn about them. It all kind of begs the question, how did this animal come to be? Where did it come from? Well, today we're going to talk more about that, in addition to some of the things that make these animals so cool. And we're also going to talk about how humanity has reacted to and coexisted with these fuzzy little freaks. Let's start by talking about where these animals come from. Platypuses are members of the order Monotremata, or monotremes. This is the oldest living order of mammals on the planet. Its earliest members were living when dinosaurs still walked the earth. The oldest monotreme fossils found date back to the early Cretaceous period over 100 million years ago, although it's believed that these mammals likely originated sometime during the Jurassic. As for platypuses themselves, fossil evidence suggests that these animals first emerged around 63 million years ago. Just missed the dinosaurs, but still nothing to sneeze at. Within that time frame of about 63 million years, there have been several different species of platypus, and they've covered a range that includes modern-day South America, Antarctica, and Australia. Today, only one of those species remains, and that is the platypus that we all know and love. It can be found exclusively in Australia, mainly eastern Australia, and then the island of Tasmania. As for monotremes as a whole, there are 5 species living today: the platypus, and then 4 species of echidna, which is a small animal that looks kind of like a hedgehog. And they can be found across Australia and New Guinea. Because monotremes are so ancient, they have a variety of features that most other mammals don't have. Their real claim to fame is that they are the only mammals that lay eggs. Unlike other mammals, they don't give birth to live young. Modern-day platypuses, as I've mentioned, they can be found across eastern Australia, and they inhabit a variety of different climates. They can be found in tropical rainforests and lowlands. They've also been found at elevation in mountain habitats, such as in the Australian Alps. They're not particularly large. The biggest males can grow to be just over 2 feet long, or about 63 centimeters for all you metric system users out there. And they weigh about 6.5 pounds, or 3.3 kilograms. Females are a little bit smaller. The biggest grow to be just under 2 feet long, or about 55 centimeters, and then they can weigh up to 3.7 pounds, or 1.7 kilograms. Keep in mind, though, those figures aren't all-inclusive, because platypuses found at different latitudes actually grow to be different sizes. Northern platypuses tend to be smaller than those that are found in the south. Platypuses are indeed semi-aquatic. That's something that they're very well known for. They spend most of their lives either in water or next to water. Their bodies have adapted accordingly, which explains at least some of their strange features. They use their tail, for example, to steer while they swim, while their webbed feet both steer and propel them through the water. Their fur, meanwhile, is completely waterproof. The outer layer keeps the dense inner layer of fur nice and dry, even after they've been swimming for hours and hours on end. This fur coat also provides insulation from cold weather and water. It traps a layer of air in order to keep them warm and their body temperature stable, even if the water they're swimming in is near freezing. These animals can be found in rivers, lakes, ponds, streams, billabongs, basically any source of fresh water you can think of, including artificial water sources. They can also be found occasionally in estuaries where rivers meet the sea and where the water is a mix of fresh and ocean. And the reason that platypuses spend so much of their time in the water is because this is where they hunt. This is where they search for their food. Platypuses are bottom feeders. They eat insects, crustaceans, worms, and other small invertebrates that they might come across. To find their food, they don't use sight, they don't use sound, they don't use scent. In fact, when they swim, they close their eyes and they seal off their ears and nostrils. So when these animals are hunting in the water, they rely solely upon their duck bill. This bill is actually extremely sensitive. It's covered with push rods, which allows the platypus to detect movement in the water, pressure changes, even sound waves, as it feels along riverbeds and lake floors looking for its food. And what's more, similar to sharks, platypuses actually have electroreceptors, specialized cells that can pick up tiny electrical impulses that are emitted by other animals in the water. Their bills have about 40,000 of these specialized cells, making them extremely efficient underwater foragers. When platypuses do catch prey, because they don't have teeth, what they'll do instead is they store their catch in a specialized cheek pouch until it can reach the surface, where it mashes up everything it's caught using gravel or mud that it picks up as it swims. Platypuses are usually active between dusk and dawn. They can spend between 10 to 12 hours a day in the water hunting, diving for a minute or two at a time before they come to the surface to breathe and consume their food. Alrighty, I think that's as good a place as ever to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Hello everyone, and welcome back as we continue our discussion about the duck-billed platypus. So far we've talked a little bit about platypuses in the water, the way that they hunt, the way that they use their very sensitive bills to search for food. But when platypuses aren't in the water, what they do is they can actually pull back the webbing around their feet to reveal claws, and they'll use these claws to dig small shelters or burrows along the water's edge. Platypuses inhabit these burrows when they aren't hunting, and if they're not hunting, they're probably sleeping. In fact, platypuses can spend up to 14 hours a day snoozing in these burrows. These shelters are usually fairly simple, with one exception. When it comes time for a female to lay her eggs, she'll create a far more elaborate nursery burrow where she'll care for her young. And I guess these burrows are just incredible. They'll have multiple chambers, multiple entrances, multiple exits, and those entrances and exits are usually covered up with vegetation or mud. And this might be to regulate the temperature within the nest. It might be a way to keep the babies from wandering off. It could be to keep predators out. And in all honesty, it's probably just a mix of all three of these. When platypuses are incubating their eggs, they'll wrap themselves around them with their bill touching their tail. And these eggs, they usually take about 10 days to hatch. When they do hatch, the young are completely helpless. They're tiny, they're hairless, and they don't even have a stomach. Their food just goes straight to their intestines. The mother will take care of her babies for about 4 months until they finally swim off on their own. Male platypuses aren't involved with raising the young at all. But speaking of those males, they may look completely harmless, but they have a trick up their sleeve that may make you think twice before you go messing with one of these monotremes. Male platypuses actually have venomous barbs on their heels. This makes them one of the only mammals on Earth with venom. This venom is more plentiful during the animal's mating season, so it's assumed that they use these venomous spurs when they're fighting with other males for mates. If they feel threatened, they'll also use them to protect themselves from potential predators, including humans. Fortunately for us, the venom isn't deadly, at least not to people. There are no recorded human fatalities from a platypus. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to avoid it. The sting causes excruciating pain that's completely resistant to traditional painkillers. And to make matters worse, that pain doesn't go away quickly. The affected area can remain sore and swollen for weeks afterwards. And what's more, even when the pain does subside, side effects such as nausea continue to linger for months. I saw a documentary one time where a man who had been stung by a platypus said that he had side effects from the sting for about a year, I think it was. So basically, just don't mess with a platypus. No matter how cute it might look, no matter how innocuous it might appear, if you mess with the wrong one, you'll end up regretting it. Now, as you can see, beyond just their looks, these animals are downright bizarre. And because of how strange these animals are, different cultures have attempted to explain their existence and explain their appearance in different ways. In one Aboriginal legend, for example, the platypus is said to have originated when a young duck wandered from her tribe and was kidnapped by a water rat who took her to wife. The duck was eventually able to escape and return to her tribe, but when she did, she laid 2 eggs that hatched into platypuses. They had fur instead of feathers, they had 4 feet instead of 2, and they had spears on their heels that resembled the spear of their mother's captor. The tribe rejected her and her children and banished them, and they ended up retreating to the mountains where they could hide both from her tribe and from the water rat that had kidnapped her. In another Aboriginal legend, the ancestor spirits are deciding on totems, and the platypus is asked to join the families of several different animals. Because the platypus shares traits with all of them, he declines, explaining that he would rather remain friends with each of them than to join a single group. He then honors the Great Spirit for its wisdom in creating diversity among animal life. So that's how the Aboriginal people of Australia kind of explained the platypus's existence within their myths and legends. Meanwhile, when European scientists first saw this animal, they were just completely baffled. In fact, they refused to believe it was real. They were convinced it was a hoax, and that the samples that were sent to them were fake. In 1799, biologist George Shaw was sent a platypus pelt from the territory of New South Wales. This was the first platypus pelt to reach Europe, but he was so suspicious of it that he began cutting into it, and he was looking for stitches or evidence that someone had sewn a duck's bill onto the body of another animal. Even when he couldn't find any evidence of forgery, after describing the animal in his book, he wrote that it, quote, naturally excites the idea of some deceptive preparation by artificial means. So for 2 decades afterwards, even with additional specimens being sent to Europe, many continued to believe it was a phony. And even when the animal is generally acknowledged to be real, its classification, its origin, its features, it caused debates among Western scientists for almost a century. There is one more weird fact that I want to share about platypuses before we conclude. I'm not really sure what to make of this one, and it doesn't seem like scientists do either. But basically, it's been discovered that platypuses are biofluorescent. Under ultraviolet light, they glow a bluish-green color. Now, they're not the only animals that do this. I guess biofluorescence is quite common in birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, invertebrates, but it's very rare among mammals. To date, only possums and flying squirrels are known to glow under UV light among mammals. The purpose of this biofluorescence is still a mystery. It's possible that it helps keep them hidden from predators, but it's also possible that it just doesn't have any use at all. In any case, it's just kind of one more item on the list of weird platypus facts. Well, there you have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed learning more about platypuses today. As you can see, these animals don't just look weird, they are weird, from their strange hunting techniques to their electroreceptors. But all this weirdness is also beautiful because it's a testament to the diversity and the adaptability of animal life. The fact that monotremes and platypuses specifically are so ancient shows that as bizarre as they may be, this design clearly works. It's allowed these mammals to survive over millions and millions of years. So if you ever come across a platypus, admire it not just for how odd it looks, but how odd it is, and how those oddities have helped it remain successful for millions and millions of years. Just make sure you admire from a distance, because remember, those birds are venomous. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Zoologist Podcast. I had a great time learning more about these amazing monotremes, and I hope that you did too. I know today's episode is a little bit shorter than usual, so if you're hoping to still learn more, go ahead and check out the research links in the show notes. Those will be available on my website or in the episode description, depending on where you're listening to this. Go ahead and check those out if you get the chance. If you liked what you heard today, first of all, go listen to another episode. What are you waiting for? But after that, go ahead and leave us a review. You can rate us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also go ahead and leave us a review on Podchaser. Hope you all have a great rest of your week, and as always, have a wild day.